Hi guys, Lindsay here with Storybook Family Farm. Today I want to talk with you guys. This will actually probably be one of those days that I end up shooting two different videos because it is currently like 8:30 in the morning and this garden area is actually going to be getting tilled later, so I'll probably bring you guys along to show you that after it's done. But today I want to talk about why it is still valuable to plant a garden even if you live in a temporary living situation. For those of you that are new here, me and my wife Tracy, we homesteaded in town for probably about 3 years or so, and then last year we decided that we really wanted more. The 3 years that we were homesteading in town, we were actively looking for land, looking for a place with more land. But last year, in April of 2022, we decided that we really couldn't take it anymore, so we moved into a camper with our then 15-year-old son and lived on family land while we were selling our house. So we sold our house, and just in the past month, we actually closed on our new house. So I figured that I should probably talk about why we still gardened, even though we knew that we were not at our permanent home. We knew that at any moment while we were actively in the gardening season, that if the opportunity arose for us to leave, we would. But we still planted like we were never going to leave there. So I figured I would talk about some of the things that we learned during that time and if we would do it all over again. So the answer is yes. I would still plant just as much of a garden as I did if we were doing it all over again. If I was still living in town this year and we didn't do the crazy camper plan or any of that, I would still do it. I gotta get out of the sun. Like, I'm like blinding myself. But I know that if I turn away from the sun, then you guys can't see me. So it's kind of a losing battle either way. All right, here's a shady spot. Thank you, camper, this is not the camper that we lived in, by the way. This was one that was given to us while we were living in the camper for me to redo to create just a little bit of extra space for us and for our son. But anyways, so if I was still living in town, would I plant a garden, even though my heart always said, we're going back to the country, we're moving. The answer is yes, absolutely. I would absolutely do the same exact things that I did all over again, including planting fruit trees that we never got to harvest from, and berry bushes that we ended up having to dig back up just a year later. The reason that I would do it all over again is the amount of knowledge and wisdom that I gleaned from planting those things. It is extremely valuable. I learned a ton just from gardening in there. And to be honest, I'm still eating food now that came from our garden. In 2021, I'm still eating food from it because of, canning and preserving the harvest and stuff. That actually carried us through living in the camper. Our garden last year, we did it all over again. We knew it was a temporary living situation living in the camper. We knew that we weren't going to be spending the rest of our lives living in a camper. We knew that we weren't going to build anything on the land that we were at, but we still grew a garden. The reason for that is, even if you fail miserably, like we did last year with the garden, you still learn from it. It is a constant. Every garden that you do, every season is different. Every year is different for the garden, but you still learn from it. You learn about different ways to keep out different predators, different pests. You learn about the ecosystem. You learn about everything. Everything that you touch, you're still learning. So even if you may not be able to harvest actual food to eat, which we harvested some, and we did sell some at the farmer's market, but based on every previous year that I've ever gardened, it was an epic failure. Like when we lived in town, I had green beans coming out my ears. Like I had so many. This past year, we only had enough to can like 5 quarts. That's how big of an epic failure the garden was. And it wasn't for lack of trying or anything. It was just things didn't go well. Things didn't work out for me. It seemed like everything that we tried, it failed. But I'm not discouraged by it because I know that I learned stuff. Sometimes what the garden gives you is peace. Sometimes it gives you food. Sometimes it gives you just emotional fulfillment. But sometimes it gives you all of those things. And I really hope this year's one that we get all those things. But my answer to the question of would you do it all over again is yes. One of the greatest things that you can learn from homesteading or farming or gardening or whatever you want to call it. For example, say you live in town, like I did, and you want to move out to the country, but you're waiting till you move out to the country so that way you can start. Well, it makes a lot more sense to start where you're at now, because then you at least understand the plants. The soil might be different where you're moving to, or it might be a different climate if you're moving a far distance, or whatever. There's a million different variables. But say you grow a tomato in a container, okay? Or you grow a tomato in a bucket, or you grow it in the ground. You're still going to learn how the tomato plant continues its life cycle. You're still going to end up learning about blossom end rot, which, if that happens to your tomatoes, it's a lack of calcium in the soil, by the way. You're still going to learn about blight, which is a fungus from if you plant your tomato plants too close together, or there's not enough airflow that gets around there. And it's just a fungus. It'll eventually kill your plant off, but you can still eat the fruits from it. You'll learn all sorts of stuff. You'll learn about the pros and cons of pruning tomatoes, and if you want to do that, you'll learn about the different types of tomatoes, and you'll also get to taste a tomato to know, I like that variety, or I'm not a fan. And it also gives you an idea as to how many tomato plants you want to plant once you get to that piece of acreage or that dream property that you have, or even if you're just living in an apartment and you're dreaming about owning a space that has even just a tiny backyard. You'll still learn something. Every year it is valuable to grow, whether that be growing your skills, growing your knowledge, growing yourself emotionally, any type of growth. It is always worth it. It is always valuable, even if you know deep down that it's a temporary thing. Like for us with living in the camper, we were actively searching. We lived in the camper it was 11 months. We still have the camper. We're working on selling it. But anyways, we lived in the camper for 11 months and we searched daily for property. We had like an hour drive circle from where Tracy currently works that we were searching in places. So we were looking in a huge area, just seeking for something, and since we had the camper, we were open to raw land, we were open to something with a house, we were open to a fixer-upper. We were hoping that we could do it debt-free with the proceeds from selling our house, which we ended up being able to do. But we were even open to if we had to get a loan, and there was nothing. But we knew that eventually something has to give eventually. But we knew that there was the very real possibility when we were tilling the garden last year that I might be driving back and forth from our homestead, our new house, to, where the garden's at. And we still went ahead and put in a massive garden and stuff just because of the fact that the rewards from a garden are always worth it. And there's a big variety of different things that you could do if you live in a temporary living situation. Say you live in an apartment and there is no outdoor space at all. One thing you could do is you could contact your local community to see if there are community gardens, or if there's empty plots that you could potentially create a community garden, or if you have neighbors nearby. Some places that have apartment buildings, there's not that far from there is people that live in a house that have a little bit of land. You could always become friends with somebody that lives at one of them houses and ask them if you could do a very small garden at their house if you want to just learn. There's a bunch of different options for people that have no access to land. And you can even grow some stuff on like a windowsill, like do some windowsill herbs. Oops, stood up too fast and the sun poked up over the camper. Sorry for blinding you guys. But there's millions of different ways. So if you have it in your heart to grow food, but you're living in a situation that is not a permanent living situation, you don't have to wait until you get to the country to grow food. Like, granted, I live in the country now, but we lived literally smack dab in the center of town. Like, our road was the second busiest road in our town because it was right next to the main road, and it was a nice little cut through to bypass all of the lights. We secretly raised chickens in our garage, and we raised meat rabbits. We did that for years. Our town had a thing where you weren't supposed to be raising birds. You weren't allowed to raise chickens. You weren't allowed to have rabbits. You weren't allowed to do anything like that. It wasn't like an HOA, but so we did it anyways because we were convinced that we weren't staying there. We were going to move to the country. We thought it would happen in 2020, but whatever. It wasn't our timing, apparently. But part of why we started a garden when we lived in town, even though we knew that we wanted to get out of town, was because I had this mentality of, well, just because we have a desire to do something, and just because we want something, it doesn't necessarily mean that it'll ever come to fruition. Sometimes you have a desire put in your heart and the door never opens to it. And we didn't know if that was one of those things. If our desire to move to the country, into farm slash homestead slash whatever you want to call it, we didn't know if that was something that was ever going to actually come to fruition. We had hoped really bad, and had cried for it and begged for it and pleaded everything that you could. We did everything that we could to make it happen. Obviously, we lived in a camper for almost a year, but anyways, we also knew that there was the chance that the door might never open, and we accepted that. We accepted that reality, and we did what we could where we were. A very popular YouTube homesteader person, she always says to use your waiting room as a classroom, and that's what we did. So that's something that, if you're waiting for your forever place, or if you don't even have land, that it's still valuable. Another skill set that you could try to learn while you're waiting is learning how to preserve food. Like, that is something that I had to learn on the fly, because the green bean problem. It wasn't really a problem, but it was one of those things where I was like, whoa, I finally got enough green beans that I could make it so that way I can can some of these. And then I had to teach myself how to use a pressure canner, because you can't just water bath it. The year prior to that, we had discovered that we could make our own spaghetti sauce. I know, novel idea. We had discovered we could make our own spaghetti sauce and salsa, so we learned how to water bath can. And then the next year, we had green beans, and I was like, oh, I like the taste of green beans all year. I want to preserve these. So then I had to get a pressure canner. Thankfully, I found one at a garage sale for like $30. Still use it today. It's the only one I got. But anyways, so there's various different things that, even if you do have the obstacle of not having land right now, or not having a permanent place to live, that you can do to work towards your dreams and work towards your goals of living a more self-sufficient lifestyle. Another thing you could do is, it's coming up on farmers market seasons. You could always go to the farmers markets and talk to the people there, talk to the vendors, get some produce, or tell them that you're interested in buying produce in bulk because you want to learn how to can or whatever. And they might really be able to help you out. I know that for my instance, if somebody came up to me and was like, hey, I see that you're selling some green beans, what would you make me a deal if it was a larger quantity that I purchased? I would absolutely do it, especially if they wanted to learn how to can and get into that sort of a thing. We need more people doing this. It really is a beautiful lifestyle, and I think it's the life that we're all meant to live. But so there's tons of different things that you can do, whether you have the land or not. And when we were still living in town, we spent a good portion of every single one of our income tax return checks on buying fruit trees and berry bushes and planting them. Now, the fruit trees, we got them, I think it was 2019 when we planted them. I knew we at least planted some in 2019. The rest might have been 2020. I'm not sure. I'm sure Tracy will let me know after she watches this. But so, people thought that we were kind of goofy for planting them, but we knew that we weren't planting them for us. When you plant a tree, you're not just planting it for yourself. You're planting it for the future generations. You're planting it for the wildlife around you and stuff. You're planting it for your neighbors. You're just planting it for basically everything, and sometimes it benefits you. Other times, like with us moving, it didn't benefit us at all, except for giving us knowledge and different things like that, and gave us an activity to do and gave us a little bit more privacy while we lived in town. But we never got to harvest them. This year they'll probably be abundantly set with fruit, but we never even got to eat it. But it still is a worthwhile investment, because the people that bought our house, they're going to get to eat it. And they might share it with some of our neighbors that, watched us plant the trees. The flowers will end up helping the local pollinators, and it'll also create a lot of beauty for our former neighbors that we're still friends with, for them to enjoy. So it creates a ripple effect, whether you are staying somewhere for a long time or not. Everything that you do can still create a ripple effect. Planting asparagus, takes years for it to get ready to go. We planted a ton of asparagus that we started from seed even, that we never got to harvest, but hopefully the people that bought our house like asparagus, or know somebody that does, or maybe a squirrel will eat it. Who knows? But so that's what I was trying to say, is that, everything that you do, it always benefits you, especially if it's in terms of learning a new skill set or anything of the sort. So if you're living in a temporary living situation like I was and waiting for your dreams to come, don't just wait idly. There's always something you can do. There's always something you can learn, even if it's just reading books or buying books about it, or even starting to save seeds, collecting seeds, buying seeds. The best time to buy seeds is actually in the off season. A couple years ago, we actually got a text from our neighbor that the dollar store right down the road from us had their seeds marked down for like a penny a pack. We bought a ton, and we're still using them. Seeds don't go bad just after 1 year. You can still keep using them. They might not be quite as good, but still can use them. So we ended up buying, a couple years worth of gardening seeds for a couple dollars. So there's always bargains and stuff. You just got to look for them. But anyways, that's it for this morning, because it's about time for me to get the tiller out and get to work. Hopefully this year won't be like last year. Last year when I was tilling the garden, where we were at, I had a major catastrophe with the tiller, and I took the tines to both of my knees, and it made it so I could hardly walk for a few days afterwards. It was horribly traumatic, very, very painful, and my knees are not the same since then as, one would probably imagine, getting the living crap beat out of their knees with a rototiller tine. Yeah, so hopefully today's tilling is not as eventful as last year's tilling. All right, if you guys are enjoying my content, or if you have comments about it or anything of the sort, let me know in the comment section below. If you have other questions or tips or anything of the sort, also let me know. I am here to help and to try to share and try to inspire those around me and those interested in this sort of topic, to just do the best they can with what they have. Gardening and growing food doesn't have to be expensive, and it doesn't have to be hard. There's an easy way and a hard way for everything, and I'm out here trying to show you guys the easy way because I don't want to work harder than I already do. So yeah, give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends on social media or in person, or if you don't have any friends, just share it with your dog, I suppose. I don't know. I've done some weird stuff with the goats and the dogs and the chickens out of loneliness, so, to each their own. But if you haven't already, please subscribe to help our channel grow. All right, thanks for watching. Have a good one, guys.